Ben.
Hello, Bryce.
That's how many chapters to go, Ben.
Oh, only two.
Only two chapters because we're at. Oh, well, actually, I can't count because 8. Right. Then we're going to do chapter 9, which is, and just for anyone who's been playing along at home, we have never discussed chapter 9 publicly outside of the book ever before.
Never.
So stick around for that. And then if that's 2, then the last one is case studies, and we're just back and forth on whether or not the case studies can be done on Facebook Live. So
we'll work it out. But you're saying you're right. So at the end of today's Facebook Live, there'll be 2 to go. I think that's what you meant, not 3, right? We're 3 at the moment. Right. But let's get into it. What are we talking about today?
I'm feeling watching my back there. I appreciate it. Hey, learning about you today, Ben. So what we've done, so I'm going to set the scene, right, because there's 3 parts to this book. And the first part is really setting up the foundation. So basically, part 1 is the foundation. Right? There we go.
Got it. Yes, you got that looking nice.
Then part 2 is the theory. So the fundamentals of investing, the property investment formula, the psyche behind price, and the buyer's decision quadrant.
Mm-hmm. The theory, yep.
And then bang, we're going to just go into the action, right? So knowledge is empowering, but only if you action on it, Ben.
Act on it, yep.
Therefore, part 3 is the action. So today we're going to talk about learning about you, which is essentially saying, isn't it, Ben, that for anyone out there who wants to give you a one-size-fits-all, cookie-cutter, production line approach to investing is just selling you a pup.
They are totally selling you a pup, Bryce. And people are complex, mate. We have different needs. We have different wants. And so part of this is learning about you is really sort of saying learning about yourself in terms of what type of investor you are and what type of tactics and strategies may you be able to implement. This is one of my fun. So can I tell you a quick story, Bryce?
Mate, I love stories. You got good stories.
So this is what we're talking about here really is what the advisor, so a qualified property investment advisor in our business basically goes through these stages, right? So we're having a conversation about who you are, what you stand for, what are your goals, big rocks in the jar, what type of investor do you want to be? And that was my fun bit. I used to love reeling off the active worker, the active weekend worker, the active manager, the passive investor, and the pure investor.
Yep.
And I just the looks on people's faces as they're contemplating, what the hell does all of that mean? And how does that work? And then, but by the end of it, once they get the explanation, they're like, actually, yeah, that's really important, because how active do we want to be, or how passive do we want to be? And if we are a pure investor, what are our risks versus what are our rewards? So that to me was always a fun conversation that I had when I was advising clients.
Mate, we actually talk about passive versus active investors in the podcast. That's just going live this afternoon at 3 o'clock. So in about 2 hours, 45 minutes. So check that out.
Yeah.
Ben, and we've been reading from our best-selling book, The Armchair Guide to Property Investing, How to Retire on $2,000 a Week.
Yeah.
So what I want to say to folks is there's an opportunity to get your hands on a copy of this book, effectively for the cost of shipping it to your door. So basically, we've bought the book. We pinched some money out of Stiggy's pocket, so she's going to pay for it, and so therefore she'll buy you the book. But all jokes aside, we've got some from our publisher in the office here, so we'll get it out to you as long as you pay for shipping. So if you go to the armchairguide.com.au, that's where you can go and get it, and they'll be on the link on the screen, right?
Right here, mate.
But Ben, I want to get some. I'm going to read through You hinted at it, but I'm going to read through the types of property investor you want to be, and then I want people to put in the comments below which one they relate to the most. But if they could put 2 in, Ben, if they could put the one that they relate to the most, and then the second one will be the one that they want to be the most, because someone might be an active investor but wants to be passive.
Yeah.
Or someone might be active and happy to be active, right? So here we go. So there's the active worker.
Yes.
Which means you're hands-on 100% of the time. You're just doing the property things. That's number 1. So number 2 is the active weekend worker, which is the fact that you got a job, Ben, and on the weekends you're doing nothing but painting and chippy work and sparky work and managing contractors and all that. So active worker, number 1. Active weekend worker is number 2. And then the active manager. So you are project managing other people doing all that stuff. So there's your three categories of active. And then there's the passive. There's the passive investor, which is, we say that's where you're the true investor, where you're just investing for property, investing in property, and then you just make sure that it's on track, but you're not hands-on. Or you're a pure investor where you just go, I just need you to do everything. Just let me know what the outcome is. I don't need to know anything about it. So, folks, active worker, active weekend worker, the active manager, the passive investor, and the pure investor. So, in the comments below, we'd love to know, which one are you? Are you one of those? And which one would you want to be, Ben?
And Bryce, what do you reckon our sweet spot is? What's the ones that we normally do most of our work with in terms of, because the three active pieces, they're all workers, right? Worker, active manager, working for a return.
Yeah.
So that's going to take up your valuable free time to do that. So what do you reckon is the sweet spot, the one that we love the most?
Well, Ben, we're always about passive income.
Yep.
But taking responsibility for what you're doing.
Yep.
So therefore, so if you're wondering between passive and pure, they both have the same goal, but one is just like care factor of 0, just get it done, and then if something goes pear-shaped, well then they weren't involved in decisions. Whereas we're actually saying outsource the execution, but don't outsource the understanding. And so therefore, if you understand what's going on, then you want to be in the sweet spot of passive investor, Ben.
Yeah, we often talk about this concept that investing in property, being a passive investor, shouldn't take more per property than 10 hours a year, Bryce.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't take any. If you've got a good property manager, you've got a good tenant, and they're doing the regular 6-month inspections and reporting to you. So we always refer to that as every now and then we want you to look over the fence, lean in, have a look at the conversation, look, all looking good, nothing to see here, and then move back on with your life. The challenge sometimes with the pure investor is someone who's usually very, very time poor. Sometimes in our minds, they also have more money. They can go off track pretty easy. So you set up a plan for them, but when they do finally lift their eyes and do something over the course of several years, what they're basically doing, oh, that's not working. Oh, let's sell that, move that. And they just make irrational decisions because they haven't been engaged and they haven't got a level of understanding. Our whole purpose of why we do this education, Bryce, is purely around this idea that we want you to have some accountability and engagement, because if you're working with professional advisors, they want a two-way conversation. They need to have, the whole idea of coaching and guiding and teaching is around them having some competency as well. So it's not all just one-way traffic, because what can sometimes happen is if you get the wrong advisor and they've got a self-interest, they'll just feed you all this rubbish and you'll just buy it, and then you'll think, well, these guys know. But in reality, they're just lining their own pockets and not lining yours. So that's why having some level of understanding and that's why we spend all this time educating people. So I think that's a good one. And they were the 5, and so the ones we love the most are the passive investors who lean in every, say, 3 months, 6 months, check up on it, and then lean back out and get on with their lives. And they're building a long-term passive income for life, i.e. the $2,000 a week.
Per week that we put on the book here, Ben. So now we might break some myths here around the perspective on how long people should be investing in the market, because we've broken it down to the speculator, the short-term investor, the medium-term investor, and the long-term investor, Ben.
Yep.
And I'd certainly love to encourage anyone who gives us some feedback on how long you would consider short-term, because I reckon our definition of short-term is going to surprise a few people, Ben.
It is.
In terms of...
Yeah. If you talk about shares, Bryce, speculation is buy, sell, trading, short-term, 12 months, 2 years.
Red or black.
Speculation for us is really, in property sense, is around 1 to 6 years. So if you're going to then speculate, because it's a bit like, this is the other little story I like to tell people when I was advising, Bryce. You ever had a beautiful, big, heavy Cab Sav, Cabernet Sauvignon, right? They make these most amazing wines, but if you drink it too early, you are drinking something that does not taste, it hasn't reached its premium, right? So what you want to do is you want to lay it down and you want to pull it out 10, 15 years later, right? So that's what we're talking about here. This is like property investing should be like that big, heavy cab save that over time it just matures and it's beautiful drinking after that period of time. So that's the story we like to talk about when we talk about short, medium, and long term. So what is the short term number that we talk about here, Ross?
Ben, you'd think that short term was for a lot of people would be under 5 years, but to be honest, we've got short term at 7 to 15 years, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
15.
No, that doesn't sound too short at all.
Some people would be thinking that was long term, Ben. But we've got 7 to 15 years. The medium term is 15 to 25, and then long term is effectively intergenerational.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, and that's the beauty. I mean, if you're thinking about the properties that we've bought over the journey, your portfolio over 25 years of holding those assets, you've got cash flow streaming in off those assets. So that's a beautiful thing, right? That's the legacy piece for generational wealth. So we do believe that, and that is something that we want to change people's mindsets on, as opposed to everyone can only think 5 years. If you're only thinking 5 years in property, I think you're missing the point. So it's really important to get that message out there. So that's our theory around residential investment in property. The other thing we also talk about in here, Bryce, in chapter 8, is risk profile. Now that's we keep it relatively simple, but we work through low risk to high risk, and then we've got moderate in the middle and low moderate. And what that really refers to is what sort of loan to value ratios are you willing to take on? What's your appetite to invest in what is traditionally a low volatile asset? But just understanding there are so many risks. There's regulatory risk, there's tax risk, there's job risk, there's leverage risk, there's income risk, there's tenancy risk, there's health and well-being risk. All of those things, once you understand all of those things, just gives you an idea in terms of what your risk profile is, and that will help you and aid you in terms of decision making around whether property's right for you.
Very well said, Ben. So just a reminder to folks that we're talking about chapter 8 in our book, The Armchair Guide to Property Investing. You can go to most good bookstores, Ben, and get yourself a copy, or there will be a link on the screen that shows you how you can get access to one for free if you tell us where to send it. And you're willing to pay for the postage and handling or the shipping for us to get it out there, we're happy to send it. Ben, what's interesting is in this chapter we broke it up between investor considerations and tactical considerations. So the investor considerations, like you say, is the risk that we were talking about before, whether you're an active worker or a weekend worker. So we've got some feedback. Alexandra Skelton has said to question number 1 that they're passive, and question number 2 they're happy to be passive, Ben. So that's good news. George Kalanikos. Let me see if I can do this. Kalanikos. There we go. George Kalanikos.
Yep. George, we love George. We know George from way back.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I think I know who we're talking about there. Passive investor and prefer to stay passive, which is great. And then we've got Sasha. Sasha is a weekend worker, Ben, enjoying being a weekend worker.
Awesome.
Pretty good. And then Megs has gone
she's
passive.
Adding value. Yep.
Megs wants to go from passive to pure. That's interesting. Ooh.
Well,
hang on, and high to the stig, she says.
Well, I don't mind you going to pure if your definition of the pure investor is you're an educated passive investor.
Yeah.
The problem that some people have is they go straight to pure and they don't take an interest. We're sort of saying you can still be passive, but you're not getting your hands dirty. You're not project management. You're not working at your craft. You're just taking an interest in your money and how it's working for you. That's getting that balance right.
Hey Ben, I just want to put a little throw it out there. Meg said hi to Stig. The reason she said hi to Stig is because Ivis's face came up for 5 seconds, right? But here's the deal, right? Knowing Ivis, she'll want to delete this video later. So if you could just put a message in the box here, don't delete. That'd be great, because then it'll go through all the feeds, and then we'll put her under a bit of pressure not to delete it. So folks, we can see the Stig. You can't at the moment, and then she has a little bit of steam coming out of her ears, which is always a bit of fun for us.
I like it when she makes a mistake.
So I guess
too many.
Doesn't make too many, no. So the tactical considerations, Ben. So we go through that. We go through that in a bit of detail in terms of how much you spend on the property research. We've gone what basic, standard, advanced are on page 75. Get yourself a copy so you can check that out. We also give some timing in terms of how long it takes to on the area location. Basic stand is 200, advanced is 500. So there's a bit of work in that. But I want to finish it off with the tax implications, Ben, because it's a big topic. Around the various gearing. So
big topic we give half a page to.
Well, mate, there's so much gold. We've got to fit
Well, the point being is that there's so many books on tax and property and tax. We don't invest for tax purposes. So that's exactly but we define what they are, and you've got to understand what they're doing. So I like the idea that we've just explained. Negative gearing is basically when there's a loss and you can recover that for the short period of time because it's not a strategy, so that's why we don't give it the oxygen. Neutral gearing is when basically the property's income is covering its costs, and the passive income or positive gearing is basically when the property's paying for all of its costs and delivering a little bit of income to you that you have to pay tax on.
So, Ben, the way I like to think of it is always through a story, as Ivis comes up the camera. So think of the bath, Ben. Imagine a bath.
Yep.
Let's say that the bath represents right at the top of the rim represents the expenses, and the water level represents the revenue. So a traditional bath is traditional negative gearing, Ben.
Correct.
There is not enough revenue to cover the outgoings, therefore that is negative gearing. Imagine if, as my kids like to do, Ben, they like to get to the edge as best they can. So they have the bath sitting just at the very top there, and any movement will actually tip it over the edge. That's neutral gearing.
Yep.
Because the revenue equals the expenses. And Ben, positive gearing is quite simply when the bath is overflowing. It means that the revenue we have associated with the asset is overgearing. But here's a little spin. You can have negative gearing, but positive cash flow.
You can. Because
once you take into account the non-cash deduction, the greatest one being depreciation, but you've also got bank loan establishment fees and all those sorts of things. When you take that into account, it's like what would you say to that, Ben? It's just like turning the I don't know, I'm probably taking the bath analogy too far now, but it's like getting free cash.
I know you're putting in a bucket into the bath, and so it overflows because you've got that bucket. Yeah, is that good enough for you?
Actually, that'll do. Yeah.
So you're putting the depreciation bucket into the bath.
Yeah.
And that
just takes. But you haven't had to do anything. You don't actually have to have any water. It's just taking up the space, right?
It's just a bit of volume. There's a bit of volume going into the water mass, and it obviously overflows.
So, folks, you can have negative gearing with negative cash flow, but you can also have negative gearing with positive cash flow because of the non-cash deductions. But generally speaking, the gearing around the lending, negative, neutral, and positive. And then the negative scenario, you can have negative cash flow and positive cash flow. So
your strategy should be built around your household cash flows, and obviously, what blend of properties you're looking for, whether it's growth assets, balanced assets, or yield assets, which we've talked about earlier. And that is a perfect segue into our next chapter, our next installment.
18 investment strategies, Ben. Look at that.
I know. Where we try and paint a picture of the types of areas and the types of properties that you need to be buying for either growth or income, Bryce. Yield.
Dare I say one of our greatest frameworks, Ben, that we've never spoken about publicly before, and we will do it next week.
The 21,000 people who have got the book so far, Bryce, 21,000 are the only people who know that information to this point.
There you go. Well, we're going to reveal it next week when we do this. Hey, Michael Sims said this, Ben. Mm-hmm. Don't delete this at all. We love the fun of live videos, but in brackets, Ivis has put, I'm still cutting the video. Like, clearly Michael has voted with his keyboard.
Our community has voted, Ivis, and they voted you in, not out.
Yes. So Ivis, that'll have to stay. We've got one here from Sammy Richards that says they're an active investor. Ooh, very good. Melissa Hill said, active manager, want to turn passive once we're through the accumulation phase. There you go. That's a good strategy.
Hands on. Yep.
And then Megs has come back to us again. Don't delete the video. Maybe maybe put a smiley face on it. Ivis's reply is yes, that's a great idea. So
very good.
There we go. So folks,
there we go.
We want you to get your hands on a copy of our book. I think Ivis will have something up for you shortly so that you can see where you can get that. But it's in all good bookstores. But also the quickest and easiest way is for you to just pay for postage and handling at thearmchairguide.com.au, and we will happily send one out to you for as long as we've got copies available, Ben. So just a reminder to anyone who's watching this that we have another great episode that's coming out this afternoon, Ben, on the Property Couch at 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So we want you to check that out. So why don't you go to thepropertycouch.com.au.